Good morning. Good morning. This is Biniam on the Bin Checking podcast. I am your host, a life recalibrator, helping others recalibrate their past so they can rewrite their futures. I'm glad to have you guys join me in today's episode. Today is episode number 88 on the Bin Checking In podcast. Number 88 as we proceed towards 100, our 100th episode. I'm not sure when that's going to be. I should almost map that, I think. But I am thrilled with the consistency that we've been able to be here and follow through for this consistent amount of time here. So that's really amazing. And I'm so thankful for those of you who have been following along and participating and being a part of the podcast. This is the podcast that has three key pillars. We've got awareness, kindness, and happiness. Those three are pretty critical for me in my personal life. They're almost kind of like the summation of how I'm working on me as a person. And so as I work on those expressions of how I'm going forward, I want to share that process with you. I want to share my experiences with you as I'm growing my way forward. I want to do that because I needed some help along the way. I didn't have all this figured out from the outset. This for me is something that I've had to learn through experiences, challenges, and insights of others. And so this is kind of where I've scintillated it down to these three key pillars, saying when I focus on these three things, it helps me to enjoy the level of life that I'm able to experience. And I also want to, by extension, share that process if you find it compelling to also experience your own thresholds of growth that way. That would be the extension of how I want to serve you as you join me in this journey. So, we want to, I think, be aware of how we're changing, growing over time. All of us are in this thing called life together, and we're not the same people that we were a month ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, or however long. We're continuing to change. So what does it look like for us to keep up to speed with how we're changing over time? What means a lot to us? Secondly, how can we experience kindness as we apply it to ourselves? And finally, how can we process all the other emotions so we can get to happiness? And so glad to have you again on this 88th episode. Today's question we are answering is, which past friendships do you miss the most? Which past friendships do you miss the most? My dear Ross, good to see you. How are you? Nice to have you here. Which past friendships do you miss the most? This is one of those self-reflection questions that has to do with our relationships and how we can improve said relationships. I've been ignoring this one here because one of the things I don't do well is, before I get to what I don't do well, let's talk about the question a little bit first. I usually like to look at the question, analyze it a little bit, and say, why is this question worth our consideration? Why should we spend some time thinking about it? And so along those lines, I would love to be able to share with you some of my thoughts on this one. Which past friendships do you miss the most? At the outset, I'm thinking this question almost presumes, Ross says, personally, I don't miss any friendships. You see your true friends as time goes on. Oh, I see. So you're like more in the present. Is that right, Ross? Interesting. Yeah, Ross, my past friendships, as far as they go, I would say for me, it's, how can I say this? They're meaningful. And they're the ones that are memorable long term. I'm like, I remember this one here because it was so powerful. Even though we're not like spending time together anymore, it was still impacting. And so my most influential friendship of all has been with this dear friend who has your name as well, Ross. I was going to tell you about him in a few moments, but I wanted you to know that's my connection there. That's amazing. But as I was thinking about this question, it almost implies that we as human beings are made for community. We're made to be social in our engagement. It's a difficult life to live when you are shut away from others, right? Consider, for example, if you've watched movies or know anything about the prison system. Even in that world there is I think they call it solitary confinement, right? When the prisoners do something really terrible or bad, they get they get put in a slammer or solitary confinement, and it's like this room that has no light access, so it's like super dark, and I think it's soundproof. You can't hear much of what's going on. You're basically shut off from the rest of the world. You're put in this solitary confinement in this prison cell for however long. Maybe sometimes it's like a week or a month. And from what I understand, most who get shut in the slammer this way, they almost go crazy because all they have is themselves and they're shut off from the rest of the world. There's no communication with anyone outside. And so it does a number on their psyche where they're like, this is like terrible. And so again, that for me, as I listen to those kind of experiences, reminds me that we're made for community. We're made to connect with others. Shar, hello. We're made to connect with others. We're made to interact and share ideas and thoughts and experiences and emotions and all that. And I think that's what most of us are striving for in our experience in life is how can we make those connections with people in our lives that we were like, hey, I want you to be a part of my life and I want to share these experiences with you. And in the absence of that, it just seems like a really sad existence. Do you guys agree or do you disagree? That's like how I sort of process or understand that element. So when we're made for social connection, it doesn't mean that we all have to be extroverts, not at all. I think even introverts, the most introvertish of the introverts, I think in some sense has that sense of desire expressed to be in community, right? And what that looks like. And so if that's the case, what does that look like for us to one, acknowledge that and to nurture that? One, acknowledge it means for me, how can I acknowledge and say, hey, this is part of my existence as a human being, that I'm going to want to reach out and connect with other people in my life. I'm going to want to learn how to get along with others. I'm going to want to learn how to engage and interact with them so that this is a fantastic connection with these individuals. If we can acknowledge that first and foremost, then it probably will keep us from that zone of pretending as if we don't need anyone in our lives, pretending as if we don't want to extend ourselves to others. Because there are those expressions, I think, sometimes whereby we sort of give that vibe, like we have everything put together, but it's really like a cloak for um, kind of shielding ourselves from potential pain when we extend ourselves, because it's a super risky thing, isn't it, friends, to extend oneself and say, hey, I'm in need of some company. I'm in need of someone to join me in my own experience and context in life. It's not an easy thing, not an easy thing at all. So if that's the case, that we are, well, we need to acknowledge that we are social beings, and two, that we need to learn how to nurture those connections. I would say along that pathway comes this experience of friendship. Friendship for me is basically two mutually inclined individuals who participate or voluntarily contribute towards getting to know each other as they experience life together. That's how I understand friendships. So if that's so, um, hmm, which friendships do you miss the most? There are some friendships that come. Hello, my Ethiopian brother, Rich. How are you? There are some connections, some friendships that disapparate, to use a Harry Potter term. It not disintegrates, but it's because of whatever reason. Maybe you moved away, maybe you had a disagreement, variety of reasons that a friendship can come to a stop. And so there are cycles in friendships in the way that we connect with each other. Sometimes it serves for a season. Maybe you are working in a context where you're like, I need to have this so that we collectively can survive this experience together. But afterwards, you're like, okay, I guess that was it, and moving on. Other times it's different reasons. Maybe it's that something else evolved. Maybe other relationships came into play that took more priority or precedence. And that's why that isn't there anymore, potentially, right? So friendships seem to have this cycle, and sometimes those cycles are necessary and happy, whereas like they're necessary and happy because potentially they let's say the friendship became toxic and there was boundaries that were crossed over that shouldn't have been crossed over, or there were experiences along the way that were like, this is not good, you know. There are a variety of things along those ways. Hamza, how are you? Nice to see you, my friend. And so that is sometimes what brings a friendship to an end. Other times it is something different. Maybe distance geographically is part of that element. Maybe it's something else that has to do with friendships that just don't mesh well, that you're facilitating on either way, and so one gets more priority than the other for whatever reason, right? There's a variety of reasons that friendships go through cycles. So acknowledging that, but it doesn't mean that you have to sort of pretend it never happened. And that's why I appreciate the question today. What friendships do you miss the most? The friendship may not be there, the friendship may be very weak now, but what what by way of recollection or memory brings it back into your frame of reference where you're like, I really appreciated that. It's not there anymore for whatever reason, but it was good when it was there, right? And that's a beautiful thing to reflect in considering these friendships. And when we're considering them, to be able to move on and say, why is that meaningful and important for me? That is something that I think is worthwhile reflecting on, because as we remember them, for me, when I remember, that's my quickest way to express gratitude. When I remember, I'm like, oh man, I remember what once was. And as I remember what once was, it enables me now to appreciate and value it and say, this is a meaningful part of my experience once upon a time. And I'm super grateful for it. Ollie, my friend, good to see you coming on. How are you? And so that's what is important for me too. So given all that, the consideration by way of memory of friendships once in existence, I think brings us to not only reflect on the amazingness of that connection, but by extension and connection, also the ones that we currently experience, saying, how can I enjoy these ones here so that I can save them? Because I'm not guaranteed that these friendships that I'm presently in right now are going to last. So while I'm in them, how can I enjoy them for what they are? Biniam, my best friend came out as bisexual to me. I acted uncomfortable to the news as I'm not sure how to act. That's a response I can understand, Hamza. Let me see if I can encourage you in some ways, some considerations. So your friend came out to you as bisexual. That one speaks to me of the confidence and trust that your friend has in you, that he could share this with you, right? To be able to reveal himself in a vulnerable way, saying, hey, by the way, I am this orientation. I'm not sure if that was a challenging thing for him. Maybe he's already out to a few other people in his life. But the fact that he chose to do that with you is a real credit to the friendship that you've built with him, whereby you've created a safe place that he can say, I feel like I can trust you. I feel I can be vulnerable with you. So that's one. So if you have the opportunity, Hamza, I would extend myself in your scenario to say, thank you for trusting me with this information here. This is really meaningful. And then I would move on to the next step and saying, how can I support you in the midst of this disclosure? How can I support you in the midst of this share that you have entrusted me with? How can I support you so that you don't feel alone? Because remember, Hamza, in the midst of friendships, we want to be able to experience this bonding element that enables us to grow stronger in support network and even learning about ourselves. This past Monday, I have a group of friends, and we were talking, Hamza, in our podcast. It's called Friendology, about expressions of male friendship that society says are inappropriate. And we wanted to challenge some of those and saying, hey, even though most of us identify as straight individuals orientation wise, we're not homosexual, we're not bisexual, how can we still defy some of those cultural traditions that guys have to operate under, that facilitate, in my perspective, more homophobia, that facilitate more distance and isolation from friendships because we're afraid of how people are going to perceive us? So I grew up in that kind of a context. I can understand if you're in that same season as well, my dear Hamza, but I'd encourage you to push against that narrative that speaks fear and saying, oh, I got to keep my distance because I don't want to give the wrong impression, and say, how can I, as a friend now, step in and support my friend who's come out to me as bisexual? And then challenge the internal narrative that says, here's what makes me feel uncomfortable, right? Because at the very heart of it, he's still a human being just like you. He's a human being like you who has fears, has worries, anxieties, concerns, all of the above. And so, in that place where they are extending vulnerability and saying, I'm not sure what the outcome is going to be here, but I wanted to share with you this element about myself, it's a beautiful gift to be able to go to that individual and say, how can I now comfort and encourage you in your experience? Uh, Prodby, hello. This is a podcast. This is my podcast, the Been Checking In podcast, where I am on a pathway for self growth personally, and I invite my listeners and those who are listening in to join me in that same process. So glad to have you here. Thanks for being a part of this. Yes. So does that help, Hamza? Does that help? I would say the two key things. One, acknowledge the gift that he gave you and saying, hey, thank you for this gift of trust that you've entrusted me to share this element of your life. I can't help but think it might be scary. Help me understand what it took for you to get to this point in sharing with me. Did you fear how I was going to respond? And then the second part, Hamza, would be, how can I, as your friend, support you through this now? How can I encourage you? How can I walk alongside you in a way that helps you continue to be who you need to be, that resonates with you internally? Does that make sense, Hamza? I really appreciate your vulnerability, even sharing that. And I just wanted to share my perspective because it's taken me a while to get to this point here. But it seems that might be the best course of proceeding forward. Yes, thank you, says Hamza. I really appreciate the helpful words. I'll try to understand the situation better. Awesome. Yeah, at the very heart of it, Hamza, what really drives me is reminding myself that those I get to connect with are fellow human beings who are trying the best they can to figure stuff out. Now, sometimes people will make decisions or do things along the way that may fall outside of our boundary. It's really important to communicate that to them, saying, hey, as much as I value and appreciate you, I can't be in the space for X, Y, and Z reasons, and so I'm going to implement my boundaries. But it doesn't mean that we have to stop showing love and care and concern, right? So that's what I would encourage you to move forward with, Hamza. But thank you for sharing that with me. I super appreciate that. Yeah, that's an important one. All right, back to where I was going though. Which past friendships do you miss the most, and why? So I have a few in my economy. I would say when I met my first ever true friend, I was about, I would say I was probably about 12, no, 11. I was about 11 years old when I met my first ever best friend. And it was a very impacting friendship, super impacting. I gave you a lay of the land. Some of you have heard the story before, but I'm happy to repeat it. I just moved to Canada a few years before. I was 8 years old when I moved to Canada. And I was struggling greatly to understand the dynamics of social etiquette. I did not know how to engage socially, did not know how to connect with people, how to make friends, how to extend myself. It was super, super difficult. And so I struggled for a few years. My first few years here, just to try and make meaningful friendships, I was lost. I had no friends. People didn't want to hang out with me. I did things that I thought would buy me some way of credibility with potential friends, but I was shooting myself in the foot. So it's a very lonely season. It was a very sad season. I was extremely like feeling isolated. I was feeling very alone. It wasn't easy. And I remember at that time, I had this great desire. I was, I remember my prayer at that time as a good Christian kid. That one summer, it was probably when I was 10 years old. Yeah. I was at the point of saying, oh, this is like such a long time now without any connections or friendships. And I'm really struggling here. So my simple prayer that whole summer was, God, please give me a best friend. Please give me a best friend. That's all I wanted, right? And then towards the end of that summer, we were living in this really tiny community in the mid BC place called the Interior, or the Caribou, I should say. And as we were living in that place, me and my brothers were in this park, this central park in this really tiny town. And we were swimming in the stream. And as we were swimming, or pretending to swim because we did not really know how to swim, we were basically just standing on the bed and splashing around, but pretending like we could swim. But as we were doing so, I remember these four kids walking up and sitting on the park bench. Now, like I said, this is a tiny community, so everyone basically knew everyone there. But these four kids that walked up, they were strangers to me. I'm like, oh, they're new. And they look really nice. I would love nothing better than to go and invite them to join us for a swim. However, I could not do that because at this season in my life, I was super shy, super shy. So I was like, kicking myself, saying I should just go and say something to them, but I couldn't. And so I just kind of stayed in the stream with my brothers, and eventually they got up and left. And I was sad as they walked away, saying, "Oh man, I think we would have had an amazing connection, and I wish I had the confidence to express my desire to connect with them, but I didn't." And so I said, oh, "That's too bad." Well, that next that very next Sunday, at the church that I attended, I was standing up in the foyer and I looked to see who was. I was watching people coming into the front doors of the church, and lo and behold, those four kids with their mom walked in the front door. And I was like, "This is my chance. I must make this happen now." And so I plucked up the courage, walked down the stairs, walked right up to the one who looked about my age, and said, "Hey, my name is Ben," because I called myself Ben at the time, which is a translation of my name, Binyam. And I said, "Yeah, my name is Ben." And he said, "Hi, my name is Ross." And that was the beginning of a fantastic friendship. Ross and I became fast and close friends. And I never experienced what it was like to have someone appreciate my existence and actually express interest in me and what I was into and how I saw the world and share time together. And like it was just a beautiful, beautiful expression of friendship. Never will I forget that friendship. It was that impacting. It was huge. I've got some fire trucks in the background. I'm not sure if you can hear them. Yes, so that was my first ever best friend that I could say proper best friend. Proper best friend just because, my goodness, they're pretty loud. Can you guys hear them? I'm not sure if you can hear the fire trucks passing by. That friendship was so impacting. I would say, in my experience, that was a friendship that turned the tide from me who was struggling socially to the present me now that has been gifted socially for decades. It was because of that friendship with Ross that I was able to grow in the experience of confidence and self esteem. Just the fact that he had chosen me for this particular friendship and that friendship had grown and deepened over the years, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. And I'll never forget the experience, mind you, also of what it's like or what it feels like to be like to feel like you're all alone and that no one wants to spend time with you or invest in you. I'll never forget that experience for me. That experience is like locked into my mind, and that's I think what drives me currently to extend myself to connect with other people along the way. I want to connect with others uh, where we can experience something beautiful and magical. That's why I think I don't struggle socially. Like I have that gift of reaching out to people and saying, "Hey, I'm interested," and in connecting with them, have this shared experience whereby we both walk away saying that was worthwhile. That was really good. Someone saw me and I saw them, and we're able to understand each other better. Love that. But that all began with Ross, my best friend Ross. After I met Ross and after our friendship began to solidify and grow, I began to not look externally for acceptance like I once did. I began to walk around with a sense of confidence that almost gave me an inroad to so many other friendships along the way. It was a really beautiful and magnificent thing. It was impacting, and that's what I mean with the impacting part. So when I'm answering the question today, which past friendship do I miss the most? Let me tell you, one of the greatest people outside of my mom that I credit for who I am today and how I've come to be me is my friendship with Ross. And I sure miss that friendship. Why is that friendship not still actively ongoing? Primarily because of distance. He lives still in BC. He lives in BC, and he has been entrenched in his career. It's a very successful career, and I'm so glad to see where he's at in that. Um, I don't keep very well in touch with people long distance. I know this about myself. It's just one of those. Whenever I'm in a place and I'm planning to move elsewhere, I gather my friends and say, as meaningful and as important as this was, please don't expect that I'm going to be able to keep in touch with you from a distance, because I do really well when I'm in this kind of a context, speaking in the present with people right now that I have in my life. And so that's been a challenge for me. That's been a significant challenge for me to accept that I don't do long distance friendships very well. I don't write letters. I find it difficult to spend time and devote time that way. But I really miss that friendship with Ross the most, just because it almost unlocked for me a new horizon or threshold in life. It gave me new eyes to see that I didn't have access to before. And because of his investment in me, it's become a gift that I've been able to share with so many others, like thousands of other people, in tangible ways where I've been able to say to them, I see you and I want to be a part of your life. My current group of friends, for example, right now, are beneficiaries of the investment of friendship that Ross had made in me and I in him. It was mutual, yes, but I think I had so much more benefit. So much more benefit. I've often thought I need to get in touch with Ross one of these days and catch up, because so much has happened since we last connected and talked. And that'll probably be like a couple of decades ago now, probably, which is a long time. But even though it's been so long since we've been connected, the impact of that connection is still palpable. It's still like so fresh, you know. So that's my response to this question. Which past friendship do I miss the most? It was with Ross. And why is that? Because Ross kind of opened up the world to me in a unique way that I don't think he even prepared for. Excuse me. So, yeah, I would love to hear from you guys, though. What are past friendships that you miss the most? And why were those friendships so meaningful to you? What was it about those friendships um, that what was it about those friendships that still remains in your memory, in your psyche, in that powerful way? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And also, I would love to hear additionally why those friendships still aren't in play. What was it that happened in those friendships whereby you're not hanging out together or communicating as you once used to? What was the element that brought apart that experience of distance in that friendship? I'd love to hear. Friendships are a beautiful gift, aren't they? Friendships are a beautiful gift. And even as I reflect on today's theme of past friendships that I miss the most and I'm so thankful for, it also causes me to think of and reflect on today's experiences of friendships that I have and why they're meaningful. So, along those same lines, with your current friendships, how can you extend yourself and communicate to these individuals what they mean to you, why they are valuable in your life, how you are grateful for their investment in you? How can you take past reflections and translate them to current wins, especially by way of making your friend's day by intentionally calling them up and saying, hey, I want to tell you how much I love you and appreciate you for X, Y, and Z reasons. Maybe they're funny, maybe they're encouraging, maybe they are smart and intellectual, maybe they're generous and selfless, whatever it is. How can we today go about and pass on some fantastic love and encouragement and affirmation to someone else because they are part of your life? In my current group of friends, we are active about this. We extend ourselves spontaneously, saying, "Hey, I was just thinking about you, brother. I want to let you know how much you mean to me and how much I value you." I get these kind of texts from my friends, and I also send them as well, because it doesn't happen by accident. It happens with intention and investment of energy, worthwhile. So, go and do likewise, my dear friends. Today, consider those that you're thinking about even right now as you're reflecting on these words, and send them a text right now saying, hey, I was just thinking about you. And I want you to know I'm so glad that you exist and that you get to be a part of my life and I get to be a part of yours. That's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. And it continues to sow depth, stability, foundation in this connection you have with them. It's totally worthwhile. Friends, this has been episode number 88. I will see you tomorrow for episode 89. Have a great Wednesday. Love you guys.